Greetings. Today I want to begin my talk by talking about almonds. Last week I talked about the almond, shaked. First time I used the term in Hebrew, I mispronounced it, so I want to apologize for that. When we are aware of mistakes here, we correct them. You know, today when I'm speaking, it turns out that it is Shabbat. I give these messages on the Sabbath, and many of you are able to hear them soon after they're recorded, so you get to hear them on the Sabbath. You know, sometimes a woman has to labor on the Sabbath. Today, in Celebration, Florida, our fifth grandson was born to Daniel and Megan, and his name is Samuel Kenneth. Shmuel Uri ben Daniel Shlomo HaKohen. So he was born this morning, and I wanted to share our family joy with those of you who hear this. I realize many of you may hear this, many years ahead of now. And speaking of family, there's so much in the Bible about family. By the way, everyone's doing well. Thank you. Thank you for your prayers for our family. So far so good. Family doing well. Mom and Dad doing well. Little Samuel's doing well. Speaking about family, the church in the Bible is pictured as the bride of Christ. There's so much in that. I want to go to Revelation 19 and verse 7. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. Today I want to talk about 5 females who should be famous. I'm afraid that they aren't. But today I'm going to talk about 5 females who should be famous. Let's go back to the days when Israel was wandering in the wilderness, the days of the Exodus, as Israel traveled from Egypt to the Promised Land. And we go to the book of Numbers. And here we have Mahlah and Noah and Hogla, and we have Milcah, and we have Tirzah. Are those names familiar to you? They should be. These are females who should be famous. Let's take a look. Numbers 27. Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. So these are Manassite women. From the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. Manasseh was one of the birthright tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. And these were the names of his daughters, Mahlah, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. The Noah there should not be spelled with an H. In modern Hebrew, a woman named Noah would just be N-O-A, I would imagine. It's it's a nun and a vav and an ayin. And so it has to do with motion, movement, mobility. It's not the same word as Noach. Noach has to do with comfort and rest. But this is Noah with an ayin, not a chet. And this is has to do with mobility. So anyway, we have these 5 daughters. And they stood before Moses, before Eleazar the priest, and before the leaders of all the congregation by the door of the tabernacle of meeting, saying, Our father died in the wilderness, but he was not in the company of those who gathered together against the Eternal, in company with Korah, which I spoke of that last week. But he died in his own sins, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be removed from among his family, because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. You know what the book of James says? You have not because you ask not. You have a question, ask about it. Speak up. So Moses brought their case before the Eternal, and the Eternal spoke to Moses, saying, The daughters of Zelophehad speak what is right. You shall surely give them a possession of inheritance among their father's brothers, and cause the inheritance of their father to pass to them. All right. Yes, you're entitled. No son, so the daughters inherit. And then he went on to further explain things. So when you ask, just the other day, I was asked a question, and it caused me to do a lot of research that was very great benefit to me, and hopefully to others in the family. I shared my comments with others in the family, and over time, we'll probably share comments of that sort with the entire viewing audience that I have over the years. Verse 8, And you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a man dies and has no son, then you shall cause the inheritance to pass to his daughter. If he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then he shall give his inheritance to the relative closest to him in his family, and he shall possess it. It shall be to the children of Israel a statute of judgment, just as the Eternal commanded Moses. So, a lot has been accomplished now. This is very important. The Holy Land was the inheritance of the children of Israel, tribe by tribe, 12 tribes. And Joseph, as the birthright tribe, received a double portion for Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh was the firstborn, but Ephraim was the dominant tribe. As many of you know, you read Genesis 48. Now, on the other hand, the Levites did not have a separate inheritance, but they would have cities here and there, 48 cities in the land, 13 for the priests, 35 for the other Levites. I now want to go to the book of Numbers, because now there's still unfinished business here. I go to Numbers 36. See, one thing leads to another. One thing leads to another. Now the chief fathers of the families of the children of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of the sons of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moses, and before the leaders, the chief fathers of the children of Israel. And they said, The Eternal commanded my lord Moses to give the land as an inheritance by lot to the children of Israel, and my lord was commanded by the Eternal to give the inheritance of our brother Zelophehad to his daughters. Now, if they are married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Israel, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and it will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So, it will be taken from the lot of our inheritance. You see, when a woman married a man of a certain tribe, she became part of that tribe. The inheritance, tribal inheritance, is passed through the father. And when the Jubilee of the children of Israel comes, then their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So their inheritance will be taken away from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. So there's still one question remaining. What happens if these women marry outside of the tribe? Now, I looked it up earlier, and I won't go back there, but I don't know, I might go back, because I believe it's in Numbers 26. And I am going to go back to the tribe of Manasseh, and there were 52,700 Manassites in the census that was taken at the end of the wilderness journey. This is Numbers 26:34. 52,700 Manassites. So that's a lot of, you can imagine a lot of eligible men to choose from. I'll continue, and I'll say why that's relevant in a moment. Then Moses commanded the children of Israel, according to the word of the Eternal, saying, What the tribe of the sons of Joseph speaks is right. So once again, God guides and directs what is said, and evidently it would seem reveals yet more information to Moses. He had a special relationship with Moses, unlike any other person in the whole history of what we call the Old Testament. You'll look at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and you'll see that. This is what the Eternal commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry whom they think best. But they may marry only within the family of their father's tribe. But they've got thousands of eligible males to choose from. Okay, as I showed you. So the inheritance of the children of Israel shall not change hands from tribe to tribe. For every one of the children of Israel shall keep the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers. And every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be the wife of one of the family of her father's tribe. So in all the 12, all of the 12 tribes had enough, members to satisfy that situation. When I was, at one time I was in a small college in northeast Texas. We had only 400 students, and a significant percentage of those students wound up marrying one another. And that was only with a community of 400. Anyway, and every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be the wife of one of the family. Of course, that's 400 eligibles, but here we have thousands of them. I'm going to read this without interrupting myself now. Verse 8. And every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be the wife of one of the family of her father's tribe, so that the children of Israel may each possess the inheritance of his fathers. Then no inheritance shall change hands from one tribe to another, but every tribe of the children of Israel shall keep its own inheritance. Just as the Eternal commanded Moses, so did the daughters of Zelophehad. They married whom they thought best, but within the tribe of Manasseh. For Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah, and this, drop the H off of Noah. The daughters of Zelophehad were married to the sons of their father's brothers. In other words, a fellow Manassite. So they did the right thing. They were the ones who asked. They got their answer. And, when you ask, then the answer comes. And you go, you respect the answer. This answer came from God to Moses, to these women. Verse 12, they were married into the families of the children of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of their father's family. This is so refreshing in the 13th verse. These are the commandments and the judgments which the Eternal commanded the children of Israel by the hand of Moses in the plains of Moab, by the Jordan across from Jericho. So these 5 daughters asked the right questions and then did what they were told. What a wonderful example. So these are 5 ladies who ought to be remembered. Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, Noah. Now I want to go into the period of the judges, and we come to a woman that is famous, Deborah. And Deborah worked with Barak to liberate the children of Israel from oppression. I want to go to Judges 4 and verse 2. So the Eternal sold, let's just go back to verse, let's go just to verse 3. The fact is the Israelites sinned and were punished. In verse 3, and the children of Israel cried out to the Eternal, for Jabin, he was a Canaanite, had 900 chariots of iron, and for 20 years he had harshly oppressed the children of Israel. 20 years of oppression. So you've heard of Deborah, but have you heard of Jael? Have you heard of Jael? I want to talk about Jael. I want to go to verse 20. Well, I want to go a little bit earlier than that, to verse 17. The commander of the Canaanite army, which was vanquished by Deborah and Barak, the commander was Sisera, and he fled in verse 17 of Judges 4. However, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Yavin, king of Hatzor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, aside to me, do not fear." And when he had turned aside with her into the tent, she covered him with a blanket. And then she said to him, "Please give me a little water." And then he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty." And she opened a jug of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him. Evidently, he was exhausted. He'd fought, he'd lost, he'd fled, and he was both physically and emotionally drained. And she gave him milk, which I think would be conducive to falling asleep. So she did. She gave him milk. And then in verse 20, and he said to her, stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and inquires of you and says, is there any man here? You shall say no. Verse 21, then Yael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple. And it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary, so he died. She got rid of this commander of this oppressive force, a people who had become wicked and degraded when you read about them in the Bible. Verse 22, and then as Barak pursued Sisera, Yael came out to meet him and said to him, come, I will show you the man whom you seek. And when he went into her tent, there lay Sisera dead with the peg in his temple. So on that day God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel. I'll read one more verse. And the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. And or Jabin would be in American English. And here we have then the Song of Deborah, which is very beautiful poetry, and many scholars believe it goes back to, around perhaps even before the writings of Homer. Even secular Bible scholars will say that this is powerful poetry that even perhaps precedes the famous poetry of Homer. And I want to go to verse 15. And the princes of... I want to go further than that. I want to go to around verse 21 or so of this poem. Verse 24, okay? This is Judges 5:24. Most blessed among women is Jael. Maybe you remember her now. Jael, I guess Jael in English, huh? Most blessed among women is Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Blessed is she among women in tents. He asked for water, she gave milk. She brought out cream in a lordly bowl. She stretched her hand to the tent peg, her right hand to the workman's hammer. She pounded Sisera. She pierced his head. She split and struck through his temple. At her feet he sank, he fell, he lay still. At her feet he sank, he fell. When he sank, there he fell dead. And so, a tribute to this heroic woman for what she did. So again, this is a heroine of Old Testament times, when the times Israel did have to go to war. Israel was not a converted church in the same sense as the New Testament church. It was a nation interacting with other nations, but a nation that was to be obedient to God's laws, to the Torah. It was to be a Torah observant nation. And at times it did have to defend itself, and this was one of those times. And one of the great heroines of the occasion was Yael. And we understand that women played a great part in that liberation, because at that time, unfortunately, the men of Israel were not the men they should have been, including Barak. With all due respect, Barak was less than he should have been at the time. But together with Deborah, with God's help, he got the job done, and with the help of Jael. I'd like to now go to the late in the period of the time of the judges. I want to go to right after the death of Samuel, the last and greatest of the judges. Samuel, who was also a prophet. You look at Acts the 3rd chapter, for example, and you look at Psalm 99, the importance of Samuel. Well, he dies here in chapter 25 of 1 Samuel. And then we have David, of course, is still I'm trying to think of the word, fugitive. Yes, David is a fugitive at this time. I often refer to the A-Team, the well-known American TV series that later became a movie. And he was like the A-team. He was considered a criminal by the authorities, and yet he was a patriotic, loyal Israelite, helping Israel, while at the same time having to flee from Saul. Well, anyway, in verse 2, now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was sharing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Naval. Oh yes, I just wanted to remember. I never numbered how many women. I just said females who should be famous. So we've seen so far 6 of them, right? The 5 daughters of Zelophehad, and then we had the Yael, the wife of Heber. So now we come to a 7th woman, and we're going to hear about soon. But first, we're reading about her husband, a very rich man. The name of the man was Naval, and the name of his wife Abigail. My son-in-law, Duby, and his wife Rebecca, they enjoy hearing about Abigail, and I think if they had had a daughter, they would have named her Abigail. They had a son and named him Gideon. That's fine. But anyway, I imagine if they would have had a daughter, they might have named her Abigail. Anyway, the name of the man was Naval, or Nabal, I guess in English, and the name of his wife Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. So she had a beautiful body and a beautiful soul. Okay? But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. He was of the house of Caleb. Caleb is a great hero of the Bible, but you can't guarantee that your descendants will always be, of the same caliber. Now, evidently, I'm speculating now, evidently he was a good bit older than she was, and very, very rich. So very likely the family encouraged her, look, this man is very rich and he's a lot older and you're so beautiful and he wants you, and if you marry him, he'll, it'll take care of the financial needs of the family. You'll be doing a great service to the family. And so she, in effect, went along with it. That's what I'm speculating happened here. This young, beautiful woman, in order to benefit her family, married an older, very rich man. I think that's possibly the story. When David heard in the wilderness that Nabal, by the way, the reason that he was named Nabal is perhaps it goes back to the root to wilt. Very likely his mother was exhausted by the labor, the pregnancy and the labor. It was so exhausting, so she gave him a name, exhaustion, in the sense that, it took a lot of effort to bring you into being. Maybe that would be a way to try to encourage him to really amount to something. And at least he did in the material sense. Unfortunately, not in the character sense. He was a brutish person. A churlish person, some translations have it. So anyway, I'm going back to verse 4. When David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And you'll see later that David had helped him. And as I told you, David was as being as helpful as he could while fleeing from Saul. And thus you shall say to him who lives in prosperity, translators interpret, peace be to you, peace to your house, and peace to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have shearers. Your shepherds were with us, and we did not hurt them. And nor was there anything missing from them all the while they were in Carmel. As desperate as we were, we didn't take anything from them. In fact, we protected them, as you'll see if we keep reading. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David. Now, it occurs to me, I think spring is the time when they shear the sheep, right? So perhaps this was maybe the days of unleavened bread or the Pentecost. Just occurs to me that it's in the spring and it's a feast time. Okay, anyway, so when David, so let me read this again. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David. So you see how humbly he speaks, how reverential he speaks to this man. So when David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in the name of David and waited. Now he could have tried to throw his weight around. He was a warrior and he had a group of rough people with him, but that's not what he tried to do. He wasn't trying to extort from the man. He was being very respectful. Then Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants nowadays who break away each one from his master." Oh no, so he's saying you're just one more rebel. "Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men whom when I do not know whence they are from?" So David, in other words, you're not really worthy. So David's young men turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told him all these words. Then David said to his men, "Every man gird on his sword." So every man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And about 400 men went with David, and 200 stayed with the supplies. David was a man with a temper. Now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, "Look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled them. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them when we were in the fields. They were a wall to us, both by night and day, all the time we were with them keeping the sheep," as I earlier said. "Now therefore know and consider what you will do, for harm is determined against our master and against all his household. For he is such a scoundrel that one cannot speak to him." And later on you'll see that Naval has another meaning. It means fool, and that's unfortunately how it worked out for him. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on donkeys. And she said to her servants, "Go on before me. See, I am coming after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. So it was as she rode on the donkey that she went down under cover on the hill, and there were David and his men coming down toward her, and she met them. Now David had said, "Surely in vain I have protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him, and he has repaid me evil for good." I want to now go to the classic King James translation, going back to this time of Shakespeare. I'm reading now from the classic Old King James, which is in this case, more literal translation. I'm in verse 22. "So and more also do God unto the enemies of David, if I leave of all that pertain to him by the morning light any that pisseth against the wall." So that's the language there. By the way, earlier in this, I think it's in this passage around here where they talk about the kind of man that Nabal was. He's such a scoundrel. Yeah, this is in verse 17. And if you look at your marginal note, it says he's a son of Belial. He's what you call a biblical SOB, a son of Belial. Belial means, worthless, a worthless person. You see this expression sometimes in the Bible. Belial, without value. So, he made a lot of money somehow or other. Maybe it was inherited. But he wasn't a good person, obviously. And even his own people that worked for him recognized that. So anyway, his wife tried to bail him out here because David was coming to get him. So you see what David said. And I'm going to go to the more tame translation of verse 22 of the NKJV. "May God do so and more also to the enemies of David, if I leave one male of all who belongs to him by morning light." Now when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from the donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to the ground. And she fell at his feet and said, On me, my lord, on me let this iniquity be. And please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of your maidservant. Such loyalty to her husband, and also such loyalty to David and to God. She wanted to prevent suffering to her husband, prevent sinning to David, prevent David's reputation from being ruined as well. I mean, there was so much good that was going to come out of this act. And yet such courage she had in doing this, because he was very angry. Could have taken it out on her too. Please let not my lord regard this scoundrel Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. Naval shemo unavala imo. That's the work in Hebrew. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. As I said, there's two possible meanings for Naval, and he fits this one to a T. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my lord whom you sent. It was so. Unfortunately, he didn't have me around when he acted in this way. Maybe I could have stopped him. Now, therefore, my lord, as the Eternal lives, and as your soul lives, since the Eternal has held you back from coming to bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek harm for my lord be as Nabal. And now this present which your maidservant has brought to my lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my lord. In other words, Nabal was evidently not that well liked and not that well respected. And so she said, well, may your enemies be that way. And now this present which your maidservant has brought to my lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for the Eternal will certainly make for my lord an enduring house, because my lord fights the battles of the Eternal, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. She had almost a prophetic vision of David. She in effect was sinning in some sense. She was, going behind her husband's back and doing this, and also confronting David and stopping him from what he wanted to do, but it really was the right thing to do. Yet a man who has risen to pursue you and seek your life, but, which we understand, as I said, but the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living. And this phrase, may his life or her life be bound in the bundle of the living. This is an expression that Jews will use when somebody dies. It's a very popular expression in Jewish culture. May his or her soul be bound in the bundle of the living. So let me now read verse 29. Yet a man has risen to pursue you, right, Saul, and seek your life. But the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Eternal your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall sling out, as from the pocket of a sling. And it shall come to pass, when the Eternal has done for my Lord, according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, that this will be no grief to you, nor offense of heart to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. But when the Eternal has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. So I'm keeping you from sinning, really. This would be wrong. And at the same time, when you become, rich and famous, remember me. Then David said to Abigail, Blessed be the Eternal God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed, and from avenging myself with my own hand. I want to go now to the old King James again, go back to the days of Shakespeare, and read verse 34. For in very deed, as the Eternal God of Israel liveth, which hath kept me back from hurting thee, except thou hadst hasted and come to meet me, surely there had not been left unto Nabal by the morning light any that pisseth against the wall. All right, now I'll go back to modern euphemism here. For indeed, as the Eternal God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning light no males would have been left to Nabal. So David received from her hand what she had brought him, and said to her, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I have heeded your voice and respected your person." And David was a man after God's own heart, and here he was about to really blow it, frankly, and she kept him from that. What a wonderful act and a courageous act, and what we would say, in the Jewish world, a mitzvah. Now Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. Therefore she told him nothing, little or much, until morning light. So you get a little bit of insight into him. And so it was in the morning, when the wine had gone from Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became like a stone. She really saved him. He would have been in big trouble. And he should have known better than to treat David that way. So arrogant, so confident in his wealth. That it happened after 10 days that the Eternal struck Nabal, and he died. So God avenged David. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Eternal. We read elsewhere. So when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be the Eternal, who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and has kept his servant from evil. For the Eternal has returned the wickedness of Nabal on his own head." And David sent and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. And why not? Here was a true woman of valor, an Eshet Chayil. And you see that David wound up even murdering Nabal's servants as well, as part of what he was evidently going to do. Or at least if he had any family, any sons, so that David would have gone overboard. And as I said, this was a turning point where Abigail, showed him what he was doing was wrong. I guess none of the men around him had the nerve to do that, or maybe they went along with it. When the servants of David had come to Abigail to Carmel, they spoke to her, saying, "David sent us to you to ask you to become his wife." Then she arose, bowed her face to the earth, and said, "Here is your maidservant, a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." Again, just the humility here, and the care. And women in those days needed to be quite careful. That was a very patriarchal culture. You see again how Esther approached Ahasuerus in her day. She was tremendously courageous, but was quite tactful how she approached the king in her day, her husband. Verse 42. So Abigail rose in haste. She wanted to marry David. Now she's part of the. She's connected to the future king of Israel, and the ancestor of the Messiah. So Abigail rose in haste and rode on a donkey attended by 5 of her maidens, and she followed the messengers of David and became his wife. A very inspiring story, very interesting. I read the entire passage here. So we have these women, females who should be famous. We have Mala, and Noah, and Hogla, and Milcah, and Tirzah. And then we have Jael. And finally, number 7, we have Abigail. And maybe now these names will be remembered by the ones who view this message. Females who should be famous. These are wonderful women of the Bible, and their deeds are recorded here. I want to go to 2 Corinthians, the 6th chapter. 2 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, and verse 18. 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 18. Here Paul quotes God's promise. 2 Corinthians 6:18. "I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty." Today I have spoken of females who should be famous. All the best to you and yours.